All right, hi again, Year 12s. This poem is called Reading Aloud. It's Rosemary Dobson's reflection on some of her time with Alec, her husband. So Alec died quite suddenly at the age of 70. Dobson would have been 76. So this poem is part grief, part celebration, part thanks. It's a bit of a eulogy to his life and their marriage. They were both in publishing for their careers. They both loved books and poetry and writing, and they made careers out of it. Okay, we're going to have a read through as we always do. Try and pause afterwards, make any notes you can, see how much you can get out of it yourself, so that when we go through it, you get different things from us, or perhaps you'll get things out of it that you wouldn't if you listen to our analysis first. Okay, here we go. Reading aloud. Low, clear and free of self, your voice went on. At night you read, and for how many years? From Sterne to Kipling, Flaubert, Boswell, Proust a whole year, and finishing, you said, one of the greatest experiences of my life. And mine, and mine. Intent to listen, quieting my hands, with plain and pearl I followed your low voice, knitting unmindfully long scarves for friends, sent off as signs of that shared calm content. Still looked for in the unshared books I choose, reading alone. Well, we gave up once, stalled on Chuzzlewit. How wrong it felt. You sensed a binding need to take books to the end. Faced with reverses, said, we must press on. From books to life, your thought. Forgive, learn from the past, press on. And I press on. Just before we get into analysing this poem, perhaps we'll step back and think, if you were reflecting on your partnership with someone over your entire life, so you've been married to them for maybe 50 years or so, and you were choosing the things to remember, what sorts of things would you choose? And then what sorts of things has Dobson chosen here to remember? What is she choosing to elevate, to remember? What are the most valuable moments? So let's think about how she's remembering and what kind of reflection on Alec is this poem? Is it about her response to him? Is it about him himself? Is it about their shared activity? We'll have a think about that at the end as well. Before we dive into looking at the content of each line, let's just notice the form here. So there's no rhyme scheme throughout, but you'll notice I've put the syllable structure here. So every line has 10 syllables. This is deviated from only a few times. So at the end of every stanza, each line is short. So 4, 3, and then 4 in the last stanza. And these lines are certainly meant to stand alone, particularly this line, and we'll get to that. We'll get to that as we study the second stanza, but these lines are definitely meant to be accentuated. And then there are another couple of lines. The first one here in stanza 1 that has 3 more syllables, and the last one in stanza 3 that we'll have a look at as well. But apart from that, every line has 10 syllables exactly. So if you were writing a poem with 10 syllables per line, notice where this structure is deviated from, and think this question here: what effect does deviating from the structure of 10 per line have on these lines? What is the point? Why would you do that? What is there to emphasize in the lines that it is the structure is deviated from? So what is the effect of, for example, having much less in the last line of each stanza? All right. Let's have a look now at the first stanza. So this is a description of Alec reading aloud to Rosemary. It's not something that happens once, but it's many times. It's a shared ritual, a common practice. Not something valued as something small. It's not just sitting together, looking at Facebook and then whatever, not really a very valuable activity, but something that Dobson holds very close to her heart. So she describes his voice as low, clear, and free of self. Free of self meaning perhaps unself-conscious, or he doesn't invest the words with meaning from him. He just lets the words from the book be as they are. Perhaps she's saying he was unself-conscious, or didn't feel the need to invest himself into the books as he read them. So his voice went on at night, and for how many years? So it's over a long time. This is a practice they did for a long time. They looked at many authors, many books, and these would have been some of their favorite. Well, but Proust was a French author. His major work, what we might call his magnum opus, been translated with 2 titles. In Search of Lost Time, and earlier, the one they may have read, was called Remembrance of Things Past. So this is likely one of the ones at least, or perhaps the one they spent reading this whole year, would have been called In Search of Lost Time or Remembrance of Things Past. Think about whether this author has been chosen for a particular reason, given that this is his major work. And then finishing that, said, remember they both loved literature. They were heavily invested in it. They loved reading it together, analysing language, coming into contact with new ideas. One of the best experiences of my life. So for him, reading Proust with Rosemary, one of the greatest experiences of his life. And we get the sense that Rosemary has put this in not just as a reflection on something that he loved to do, but something she loved to do. She says, and mine, repeated twice for emphasis. So she loved also reading Proust, but more than that, this experience, this reading aloud, one of the greatest experiences of her life. Being in Alec's company, reading together. All right, let's have a quick look at stanza 2. So intent to listen, quieting my hands with plain and pearl, I followed your low voice. Knitting unmindfully long scarves for friends, sent off as signs of that shared, calm content. Still looked for in the unshared books I choose, reading alone. Okay, so the middle stanza, again, quite a short poem, really. Typical of her later works. She becomes briefer, more simple, more concise. So intent to listen, she was intently listening to what Alec was reading. Quieting my hands, so quieting my hands is in keeping them busy with knitting, planing and purling. This is an example of the kind of knitting she might have been doing. Quieting my hands, so to stop them fidgeting, to pay attention. Knitting unmindfully long scarves for friends. So long scarves she would knit for friends, but not just any scarves, unmindfully long scarves. Unmindfully not meaning unconsciously, but more like uncaringly long, or they didn't mind they would be long. So she was unmindful of how long the scarves got because they're a byproduct. They're not the aim of the activity. She's not really minding how long the scarves are. They're just something to do while she follows the low voice of Alec reading. And then sent off as signs of that shared calm content. So the scars were the byproducts of their time together. Symbols, they become symbols, signs, symbols of that shared calm content that they have. Simple words these are, but powerful. Powerful, simple words from Dobson. Shared calm content. So shared calm content of their relationship, their shared joy. And then this is what she is looking for. The shared calm content is still looked for in the unshared books I choose, reading alone. This is a heartbreaking line, this last one here, though in a happy way. So in her reading, after Alec has died, she's still looking for that shared calm content that they had when they read together. Every book she reads is done with the context of reading being their relationship, being the experience that she did with him. So it's lovely that she has that in the past, but heartbreaking now that she reads alone. So reading alone, of course, set here on a line by itself. Reading alone, just 3 syllables, set by itself, as she is by herself now without Alec. So to summarize, she's quietly listening, intent to listen, contentedly knitting as he reads unmindfully, not minding, not caring how long the scarves become, sent off to friends as signs of the shared calm content, which is still looked for. She's still looking for that experience that they had together in the unshared books I choose. The sense of loss here, the unshared books. I'm reading books still, I'm doing it with the knowledge that I did it with you, but now I'm doing it myself. You should hopefully sense how heartbreaking these lines are. Reading alone, she's really feeling a strong sense of loss here. There's also a strong contrast though with the title of the poem. So this is called not reading alone, but reading aloud. So how do these two phrases contrast with each other? Reading alone has very different connotations to the phrase reading aloud. What is the difference between reading aloud and reading alone? So think about, why has Dobson not called the poem Reading Alone? This is very important as we look at stanza 3. So it's not focusing on the loss of Alec, it's focusing on reading aloud. What are the different connotations in this phrase compared to the grief and loss in reading alone? Okay. Last stanza. We have a brief memory. We gave up once, stalled on Chuzzlewit. Actually, let's just briefly look at the form, the syllables again. So we have 10, 10, then we have 12. This is the only other line apart from the last ones of the stanza. We have more. So why is this one emphasized? Have a think about that. You might want to use that in your writing about this poem. And then we have a split line here, though it sticks to the 10-syllable structure. But the split line here emphasizes these individual passages, these individual phrases. So looking at that as we go through. Well, we gave up once, stalled on Chuzzlewit. How wrong it felt. You sensed a binding need to take books to the end. You sensed a binding need to take books to the end. Constant enjambment here throughout her later life. Now, Alec was a publisher, originally he would have been a book binder even. So he sensed the binding need to take books to the end. What else does that mean, of course? What does it mean to take books to the end? Well, it means to finish them, to read through them, even though they weren't enjoying this particular novel, Martin Chuzzlewit by Charles Dickens, finding it hard going maybe. They gave up, but it felt wrong. So Alec sensed the binding need to take books to the end. Faced with reverses, wanting to go back, looking backwards and thinking, oh no, let's not do this, it's too hard. He said, we must press on. Alec rejected this idea of stalling on a book. He said, you have to finish it, you have to complete the book. So even when you dislike something, you need to hold your head high, show resolve, and press on. And then the next line, from books to life, your thought. Forgive, learn from the past, press on. So not only in terms of reading books, but also in terms of life. When you dislike something, you should press on. And this is Dobson's final message of the poem, and I press on. And this is also a bit heartbreaking, though perhaps with a note of hope at the end. So even though she's got a real sense of grief in reading alone, she's learnt from Alec this philosophy for life. Forgive, learn from the past, press on. Even when you're not enjoying perhaps what you're doing or you want to go back, choose a different book. You can't. You have to learn from the past, but always press on. Always look forward. Okay. So in many ways, this is a stirring tribute to her husband's impact on her life, to their relationship and their marriage. Again, Dobson, we should notice, is finding the deepest value later in her life in simple things. When she chooses to write a poem, which is a bit of a eulogy or honoring her husband and their relationship, she chooses them reading aloud together, an everyday activity, literally an everyday activity for them, something that would have been very normal. But that's what she found had the deepest value. This is knitting while her husband reads aloud is what she misses when he's gone, and she doesn't value it for shallow reasons. So imagine instead our lives finding a partner, perhaps reflecting at a funeral. Maybe you enjoy flicking through Facebook, looking at cat videos together. If that's going to be a true experience for you, maybe. I don't think that would be as deep an experience for me, and I think Rosemary thinks of this as a deeper experience for her. So this is a simple joy of shared contentedness, shared company and concern with the books. So it's a grieving that the joy they'll never have it again, and it's a resolve that even though they won't have this again, they won't be able to read together, she'll press on. She'll continue reading, continue living. It's reflective of the past, but it's facing the future. It's quite a beautiful poem, this one. It might even be my favorite, I think, of all Dobson's poems. So I want you to decide for yourselves, what do you think this poem is about? Here are some options. You might want to think of some others of your own. How would you phrase some other of your own? But here are some main messages, perhaps. It could be one or a combination of these. So is this poem about remembering Alec fondly? Perhaps that's the main message. Perhaps it's about grieving Alec's loss. Perhaps it's about resolving to press on after his death, after losing him. Or perhaps it's mostly about remembering their relationship fondly. It's easier to say, yeah, sure, it's about all those things. But if you had to choose one, which is it mostly about, would you say? Which one is the primary meaning of this poem? And why do you think that? What are the main symbols? What are the main moments in the poem? What combines to give that emphasis? Perhaps what does the form of the poem suggest is the main emphasis here? Perhaps choosing to put some lines by themselves or in the middle or at the end mean that you think one of these is more relevant or is more the primary meaning of this poem than another. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that poem as much as I did. We have one more poem to go and then we will be done. I'm looking forward to seeing you all again tomorrow. So until then.